Hello, listeners. It's Amy Board. I am your host. Welcome to Ask the Expert. Oh, we have a good conversation for you today. Transition and change, man. Transition and change. Today's guest is none other than Patrick James Lynch, the CEO of Believe Limited and the creator of Bloodstream Media and even the Ask the Expert podcast. He was the first host. Patrick and I are going to have a conversation today about where the podcast is going. You know, I am excited to announce it. It's bittersweet to announce it, but this actually will be the last episode of Ask the Expert. For the time being, we are not completely committed to having the podcast go away completely, but it is going to, the conversations and the expert conversations are not going to go away. They're just going to be absorbed in our flagship podcast, Bloodstream, with Patrick and Natalie. And fun to announce, I am going to be the third host of Bloodstream. So I will not go away. I know I can hear a collective sigh of relief from you right now. Like, you can still listen to my droning on. I know you're so excited. No, but really we're excited about it. And Patrick and I are going to talk a little bit about the decision and why, and the new things that are coming out from Believe and from the podcast network in particular. Some really exciting news. So we would love for you to stick around today and hear a little bit about it. Patrick goes pretty deep in explaining what the Pain Pod is, our new podcast on chronic pain. So that is going to be a good listen. But this is a time for change. This is a time for growth. This really is a decision that is coming out of some pretty intense growth of our podcast and what we want to do with the network. So we're so excited about it. So stick around, grab yourself a cup of coffee, and let's have ourselves a conversation. I am your host, Amy Board, and welcome to episode 40, or our To the Future episode of the Ask the Expert podcast. Patrick Lynch, you get to be on Ask the Expert. I feel like you started this podcast, baby, and now it's like coming full circle where you get to be a legit guest on Ask the Expert.
It's like when the kid goes off to school and then comes home and then says, "Would you like to go back to school with me?" And you say, "Yes, I would. I would like to come and go to school with you." And here I am.
Does it feel weird? Does it feel like...
Thanks for having me back. Well, it only feels weird because like of why we're talking is like a little weird. So that's a little weird. That's the only thing that's weird. I won't lie to you.
I feel weird. You're usually interviewing me, so I feel weird. Like even when we were prepping this, you were like, write some questions. I was like, oh, it's my responsibility to do the questions this time.
Well, it's funny too because then you send them over and I was like, okay, and here's some other questions. And then one of your responses to that was like, let's talk about control. And I was like, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was not meant to be a dig.
I totally tease. But yeah, so I guess by now people would have heard the introduction. They know that Ask the Expert's coming to a close. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, I think so I'll tell you, the strange thing is, we just had a great two-part interview. Well, you had a great two-part interview with Len Valentino from NHF. That followed a two-parter with Sharon, so the respective leaders of the two national organizations. By most accounts, like Ask the Expert's doing great. So it begs the question, why is it going away? And this is the conversation Amy and I and others have been having for a while. And really, it's the result of growth. It's a good thing. There's other projects, there's other responsibilities, and there's ways in which we can carry forward, we think anyway, the best of what we have to offer here on Ask the Expert through in the Bloodstream podcast and our other podcasting work that we have lined up. But Ask the Expert in and of itself for now is actually best off just hanging out in the parking lot, as I like to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as we've had these conversations that have been months in the making, they haven't happened overnight, but I think my personal feeling about Ask the Expert was it's such an important conversation in place for the people that need that information, and I don't feel like it's going away. I feel like it's just going to be through another medium that will absorb it in a way that will be beneficial to everybody, I think. I mean, I just think it will actually flourish more as part of the Bloodstream podcast, I believe.
Yeah, I think so too. It's funny you say that. It's because it's the kind of thing that can sound sort of like hokey, but I actually think it's true. With your coming over to join, has that been announced? Did you mention that in the introduction, or are we breaking news now?
No, we're breaking news.
All right, so Amy's going to be joining the Bloodstream podcast as part of this transition. So you're not going to be losing out on Amy as a podcasting host. She's just going to be joining Natalie and myself over on the Bloodstream podcast. So when we say we'll have the ability to bring forward the best of Ask the Expert through Bloodstream, we're literally taking a toast. So, I mean, I don't know what more we could do. So there will still be the opportunity for those expert conversations that Amy's gotten so good at leading and honing for our bleeding disorders audience. So, excuse me, we can cut that. Let me do that again because I tripped over my own little mucus there, which is disgusting.
I hope that stays in.
I don't know where to go back to.
I hope that stays in the mucus.
You're not going to give me a chance to go back, I guess, has to stay in.
I am very much looking forward to it. And I think it will be, I think it will truly be a place where the conversations can grow and be ideated in a way that will be very helpful for this. So I think our audience won't go anywhere. I don't know about you, but I heard a sigh of relief that I'm not going away from our listeners. JK?
No, I heard it too. I have 2 sets of headphones on right now. I heard it loud and clear.
No one can see this, but Patrick and I are Zooming while we're doing this, and he's wearing legitimately 2 sets of headphones. Earbuds, and I'm wearing earbuds and then headphones. He's wearing 2 sets of headphones.
This isn't... I look like when the kid just showed up at the studio for his first day of the internship, and they threw him in the booth for some reason, and he just grabbed the first 2 things that would transmit audio into his ears. I look like that, and... Hello, I'm the founder of Bloodstream Media. No, this is, I got a kind of crazy look going on right now. But, I'm glad Ask the Expert, and I can hear in the background here that Russell's chosen this moment to jingle his, hello, hi, buddy. Yeah, do you mind? We're just going to keep going. You really have gotten so good at these conversations with people whose expertise is critical to our community's health and well-being, and who we need to find as many opportunities to platform and find as many opportunities to sometimes extract the information that's so rich and important, but doesn't always translate just directly from expert scientist or doctor or advocacy lead all the way to patient or person who needs it the most. So I think you've done a really nice job of bridging that. That is important, and we will be doing that on the Bloodstream podcast going forward. So the Ask the Experts that you have come to know and love won't be going away completely. You'll just need to make sure you go over to the RSS feed for the Bloodstream podcast and subscribe to that one if you haven't already. So yeah, Amy, and thrilled that you're going to be joining Natalie and I. It gives the Bloodstream podcast, too, a nice chance to reevaluate where it's at, and we've been having conversations about its structure and its goals and what we're trying to do in podcasting in general, because, of course, all of this is stemming from larger decisions around the media output of Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media. So really excited about what all this change means, and I hope listeners don't mind making the transition over to Bloodstream. Plus, you do have other podcasting stuff coming down the pike that people are also going to get to listen to you on, aren't they?
Yeah, the stuff that is in discussion right now with the entire team, which is really incredible, is exciting. And I think, maybe to give listeners a bit of context, as we might have some new listeners, where did the podcast network, so to speak, where did that idea come from? What was your vision when you started it, when you had this idea? I mean, I want to be sensitive to our bleeding disorder community, that, this community will not be pushed aside in some of this, growth as we're starting to build the network. But where did the vision come from? And then, maybe we can go into a little bit about some sneak peeks about what's coming down the pipe.
Sure. Yeah, the vision for the podcasting. So we started in, I think it was June of 2016 with the Bloodstream podcast, which was the first, and then Ask the Expert followed Within the year. I don't remember actually. I haven't gone back. You would think in prep I may have, but I didn't go back to see when the first episode went up. But it was maybe a year-ish. And the idea was that there was more and more and more and more and more and more dialogue happening on social media platforms and from community members online who are looking to connect, who are looking to hear from people who they trusted and connect with people who shared some lived experiences. And for as much organization as our community has and all of the live events that when there isn't a global pandemic we are accustomed to having available to us, and the important community building that then takes place, there was just so much activity happening online that I thought we could do more to elevate the online conversation. E-magazines and e-publications have a place, of course. And the work that we do with Stop the Bleeding as a comedic web series, yes, there's education baked in and educational messaging, but it serves a specific kind of need. It's not where you would go when a news story broke about bleeding disorders or some research came out that you didn't really know what to make of. And I wanted us to be one of the places people could get used to going when they wanted to know what's important, how do I think about this thing? Not telling people what to think, but just giving them the ideas of here are the angles to consider because so much of this stuff is complex. There's a lot of complexity to living with a chronic disease. And I just didn't see that anywhere else. There are some community members who have done some podcasting, and I don't mean to assuage. No, that's not the word. Espouse. I don't just say bad stuff. I don't mean to say bad stuff, but I knew that I believe we had the operational capacity to do this in a high quality, repeatable, predictable way. And I knew from my previous work as a producer the importance of doing that if you want to build an online audience. So I thought we had a running shot at being the entity that could galvanize people around some media when those news stories broke, when there were topics of interest, when they were looking for someone to hear from an expert, to hear from a community leader on a topic of relevance. Where could they go? And I wanted Bloodstream to be that place. Bloodstream podcast first and then media. Ask the Expert was born out of wanting a place specifically for those deep dive conversations where we could really benefit from having some of the world's foremost experts in these bleeding disorders fields. What privilege to have access to them and their willingness to come on and talk to us. But of course, that's a certain kind of conversation, and you got to be in a certain kind of mood to want to spend an hour with a doctor getting into the ins and outs of von Willebrand disease and von Willebrand factor and how it should and should not behave in type 2A. Like, that's a certain thing. So I think this served a great purpose, and under different circumstances, Ask the Expert as is would continue. But given when we at Believe look at our total output and knowing that you have another podcast that you're working on right now, we wanted to bring in additional expert voices into the Bloodstream podcast. We have other media projects that we're just shifting people around. It just made a lot of sense to bring them together. I am sensitive that there will now not be that singular spot that you can go to for just the expert voice. Now we're going to bring the expert voice into the Bloodstream podcast. So it's not as isolated, and for some audience members, some listeners, that might be a disappointment, and I think it's worth just acknowledging that. The good news is the Ask the Expert library isn't going anywhere. We're not taking that down. And there will be long-form interviews as part of the Bloodstream podcast rollout. So even if you subscribe and, the chit-chat and banter between Natalie and I, or, if we go off on some tangent that's not related to the expert maybe that won't be for you. But if you subscribe, you can choose the episodes where you see, oh, okay, they're going real deep into the latest recombinant therapies for von Willebrand disease. That's super specific and interesting. I want to listen to that episode, and it's okay if you ignore the rest. We won't be offended. So that was the idea. To give people that place. I think we've done a good job over the last 4 years now. Quite literally, we're in mid-late June. Over the last 4 years in becoming that place, we have 8 podcasts currently, and that number's gone up and down as some have started and gone, but we have 8 that we're currently responsible for. That number will continue to fluctuate. They serve different needs, and they've enabled all kinds of amazing conversations. I mean, people like Andy Slavitt, who's the former head of Medicare and Medicaid in the previous administration. Like, we had him come through to talk about why the Affordable Care Act is important for people with bleeding disorders and chronic diseases. We've been able to bring Alex Borstein to audiences in interesting ways. And we just talked about at the beginning of this episode how we had two of the national leaders come through Ask the Expert in just the last 2 months. So we've done a nice job at Bloodstream Media, I think, of becoming a place that has brought in the conversations and the voices that are important to consider when trying to make the best decisions possible on how to live happily and productively when affected by a bleeding disorder.
Yeah. I think one of the things for me personally, when I had the chance to go to community events when we were screening Bobby Dear Blood in particular and meet listeners on the road, people would come up to me and say, I listened to Ask the Expert. The thing that they were drawn to was, most of them were, they lived in rural communities. They didn't have access to their hematologist.
Yeah, sure.
They would see their hematologist, once a year for a comp visit. And of course, you only get that small, chunk of the physician actually in the room. And so to have the ability to have, to hear a physician talk about the new and emerging therapies, what are some of the ideas, what are some of the research foundings, I think it's very important. And I just want to stress to our listeners that sliver of our audience will not be forgotten. And I think it's really important as as we build this podcast, that those types of conversations, won't go away, and we're going to do our best to get the right people in the expert chair. I think the thing that is exciting for both Patrick and I is that this enables us to be more nimble with who we bring in and who gets to do the interviewing. I think both of us, Patrick and I, we giggle about it, but we come at things from things very similar and very different. So we would have very different questions. One of the things I love about working with Patrick in particular is that he comes from, a patient and a patient advocate's view. And I come from someone who is not directly affected. And both of us have a very different view of what we would ask. Both of the opinions, I think, is really important. And so I think the outcomes or the product of the interview will be more in depth. We're hoping. So I hope that it doesn't go away. I do think that it might be, it isn't going to be a singular conversation, but it will give it, we're going to be doing it more. So there's not going to be just one a month. We're going to, now that we have the three of us, we really want to make it more consistent, whatever that means to us. But I see Patrick looking at his whiteboard right now, looking at the schedule, which means it's going to get gnarly.
Yeah, well, eventually. The third Monday of the month is when the flagship episode of the Bloodstream podcast always comes up. So in July, that is July 20th is the third Monday of the month. So that will be the first time that you hear Amy on Bloodstream, and that will also be the time where we are more specific about what's to come on the Bloodstream podcast and give you a little look ahead. And in that, also do a look ahead to really the following week when the Virtual Bleeding Disorders Conference begins, which is kind of wild. That is rapidly approaching.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Wanted to do a quick plug. I'm going rogue, but wanted to do a quick plug about the Pain Pod. All episodes have now been released. Tell listeners, if they don't know anything about the Pain Pod, what it is, the inspiration for it. I personally think it's one of the best, audio experiences that we've produced at Believe. So tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's cool. Good. I'm glad that's your reaction. It's so aptly titled The Pain Pod. It's looking at pain, particularly chronic pain. And in season 1, which is 6 episodes plus a recap after show episode with a couple of our experts, we essentially try to answer the question, is there anything definitive that we can say we have learned about effectively treating chronic pain? Knowing that it is such a broad topic, there's so many different experiences, but there has been so much research done, and it does affect so many Americans. And if you dive into the data on this, it's really kind of mind-boggling how pervasive pain is in the culture. So yeah, I wanted to take kind of a fresh look at pain as someone who has lived with chronic pain as long as I can remember, and has always been interested in things like pain scales and pain tolerance, and my experience of pain and someone else's experience of pain. And I thought it would be a really neat topic. Was very lucky to find a sponsor that was willing to let me and let Bloodstream really make it what we wanted it to be, which is not always the case, and can't always be the case. But in this instance, it was. So we really ran with it and created something I'm quite proud of that looks at pain from a multitude of angles. The first episode kind of sets the stage and gives a lot of background into why we're doing this, and particularly a bit more as to what my experience with pain throughout life has been. But then we take a look at all kinds of things: how culture, family, race, gender, location. We talk about faith and pain. We really do take a look at it from a lot of different angles. So the Pain Pod, part of bloodstreammedia.com, that's there. And actually, that's a great example of something that was, this isn't the best way to put it, but like a pet project of mine that I didn't stop doing the Bloodstream podcast, but I did then also take on this other thing. I will tell you, there's no way on earth I could be doing that right now because of where we are in the calendar. And it kind of gets back to the point, as you're working on a podcast that's all about gene therapy. And the next time I'm going to go work on the pain podcast, if you and I and Natalie are all part of that nucleus of the Bloodstream podcast, we get to make sure, to your point about not leaving people behind, that will not be negatively impacted when we do go off and work on these other projects, as will happen so long as our primary bleeding disorders podcast continues to have such support. And I kind of think I haven't framed it quite that way yet, but that's part of it too. It's making sure that, to your point again, as we grow and as Believe Limited, as the larger content agency and production company behind Bloodstream Media continues to grow, to ensure that we can continue to have that regular touch point with community members who have come to depend upon our podcasting output for some amount of engagement, connection, and information. If we focus our energies in an ongoing way on the Bloodstream podcast, and then have these offshoots when time allows, that are seasons, they begin, middle, and end, they're not ongoing like Bloodstream and Ask the Expert, it'll actually help us protect the ability to serve the community well, not hurt it. So it's helpful for me to remember that too.
I think
so. That's the plug for the pain pod.
I would have accepted. It's really great. Go check it out. No, JK. No, it's chronic pain is such a layered conversation and such a
it's wild
layered individualized experience. And so the more and more, it's like mental health. The more and more that we can talk about it and normalize it, and gain from peer experience. So it's a very, very important listen. So if you haven't seen it, please go find it.
I'll also do a quick shout out to Greg Holzman, our podcast producer who joined us at the beginning of the year. He produces and edits the Bloodstream podcast. He also worked with me on the Pain Pod, and the Pain Pod's a highly designed listening experience. So it's an audio documentary type listen. It's not like this with Amy and I going back and forth. So there's also a lot of music, a lot of sound design, a lot of layered sound. So the goal was to try to create an audio experience. So just to make that point as well. Better with headphones if you got them. Better with headphones if you got them.
Or two.
I've got two pair, everybody. Are you sad
about Ask the Expert?
Yeah. Does it feel like something is going away, but does it feel like that to you?
No, I'm actually looking forward to it because it will, I'm looking forward to it for several reasons. One, I think I will come out of my shell a little bit more with you and Natalie. It'll be fun to have people to, kind of, build that relationship with. And then I think
it is a very isolating experience hosting a podcast like Ask the Expert, as I recall from hosting the podcast Ask the Expert. I think on the listening end, and I think about this sometimes when I've listened to your episodes, I know that I know the room you're in, I know what that microphone looks like, I might know the hoodie you're in, but when you hear the finished product, it's so strong. You'd never, as a listener even, and as a producer who's listening, it's like hard to remember sometimes when we hear great podcasts. They're recorded in rooms with people, and sometimes rooms with just one person, and it's that one person bringing the awareness of the audience and the conversation with you all who are listening to life through their own active energy and imagination. There's no other human to bounce stuff off of. In our situation, it's not even like there's a producer in that room with you. You're just by yourself. So kudos on carrying that mantle, because it ain't easy, and you're right. There's more dynamics that can be extrapolated when there's three people in a conversation with each other as opposed to one person who's leading remote interviews.
And I truly believe that the interviews and the, end product of those interviews will be better with, at least you and I and Natalie as well, with our collected thought. A lot of Ask the Expert, because it's just me, comes through my lens. And
sure.
I think some of the substance that will come out of those interviews will be really good. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about being able to discuss many things, adding my lens to, some of the topics that we have. I'm excited about potentially talking about, our community is so strong with advocacy and has such an interest in that and their, and how they engage in their civic duty. And that has been my passion. That was my first love, truly, when I was working in nonprofit work. And so to add that element, to our conversations is going to be, enjoyable for me, and just to continue to think about it through a patient lens. I truly don't feel like I'm going anywhere. So no, I'm not sad.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I think we were both a little self-conscious of the other and kind of hovering around the realization that the best decision here is going to be to put this in the parking lot.
I think so too. I just didn't really feel like it was my, it was like my decision. I feel like you had created it, and I just didn't want to overstep.
Well, I mean, it's that's an interesting, when someone is, we're at a stage now with the amount of projects that we have going on that when someone's off and running with something, I'm of two minds with the quote unquote big decisions. On one hand, I want that person to feel fully empowered to make that decision. If they don't feel fully empowered, I want that person to feel as though it's okay to ask for help, ask questions, say I don't know. But I want that person ultimately to feel like this is my call. At the same time, it is my responsibility to believe Limited's mission, vision, and values, to ensure that what we're doing is reflective of Believe's mission, vision, and values. So if that's not happening, or if there's a way in which that might be able to happen, in my opinion, better, I at least want to offer that or voice that. What can become problematic is, I don't think is a weird thing to say, but I think it's true. Like, because of my role, my voice is not necessarily one that can be, that's weighted in the same way, whether I like that or not. Like I can ask that, like, say, this is not, I don't feel precious about this, I'm just floating it, but I am sensitive that it may not be received as casually as I would like it to be. So there's interesting dynamics when it comes to things like, what do we do with Ask the Expert at this inflection point? Or, we were just making some decisions about posters and titling for one of our projects, and, kind of deciding, all right, I don't think it's black and white. It's much like a lot of the work that gets done. You just talked about advocacy on the policy side of things. There's ultimately a lot of people involved in making things happen. The paperwork only has several names on it in the end, and like one or two people will be those who are remembered for bringing it to the floor or having it signed into office or whatever the case may be. But behind closed doors, so long as the people who are involved have an understanding of what that process is and what all this outside noise means, then that's fine. And I think we've done generally a good job of you tell me, actually, have we done a good job of giving people the reins to take on the projects that are given to them with full gusto, or is there too much involvement from, not to turn this into like a workplace, deconstruction here, but
no,
I'm curious, I guess.
No, absolutely. I think it's kind of a two-edged sword. I think I think it's up to the person too, to feel comfortable being able to do that, to like take it and run.
That's true too.
And I have felt that. I have definitely felt empowered to do that. I talked about it, some conversation you and I had, some Facebook Live or whatever, about being thrown into the deep end in some creative ways that were really, it was so healthy for me to just be like, you can do this, figure it out on your feet. And you guys have been, it's a good culture for that. And I guess, that kind of leads me to a next question. This is going rogue too. I had all these written questions, everyone, shocker, and we're not doing any of them. But tell, like, and I don't think we can give anything away. So we can't give titles away. I don't think it would be good to give titles away. But we have been engaging in some really, really fun, creative, innovative conversations as an entire team. So not like the podcast team, but like every human that works at Believe has been a part of these conversations of what would be a podcast that you would listen to. And we have pitched some, incredible ideas. I don't know how many pitches actually came in, but I think there was like 3 or 4 that the leadership team, the podcast leadership team decided to like greenlight. But talk a little bit about that, about the future of what this network might be, and kind of get people excited as stuff is going to come out. It's not going to be quick. It's not coming out, next month. Like, things are still ideating, but really cool conversations are happening on the podcast side.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting year that way. And of course, COVID and the quarantine has it has influenced how I think everybody thinks about podcasting and engagement and digital connection and media. So for the longest time, I've said, with Bloodstream Media, we've got a foot in entertainment and a foot in health. And really, I believe we've got a foot in entertainment, we've got a foot in healthcare. And the vision was that Bloodstream Media would continue to grow in such a way where it would be that go-to network for it's all the healthcare information you'd want, but with an entertainment flair prism, this great hybrid of entertainment and healthcare, maybe with a rare disease bend. And I think we're still going that way. But what's been really clear to me in these conversations you're alluding to is that actually much like in 2016, when the decision to start Bloodstream podcast was in part influenced by, hey, we've got the operation to give this a shot. If when I started my very first podcast, the My NY podcast, which if you hunt, you can still find teasers for episodes on YouTube. I, one night in a fit of rage, took it down off of iTunes, which was a mistake. That's a story for another time, and not that interesting a story. I pretty much just told you what happened. But you can still find the teasers from interviews with people like Pete Davidson, star of the new film King of Staten Island.
What?
He was one of my first interviews on My NY Pod back in the Disney.
Somebody go find it and email or tweet it to me immediately.
So that was just me. When I was doing that was just me. And then with the Bloodstream podcast, it was like, okay, this would require an operation to try to get off the ground, but we have that. Can we do that? And now we're at a point where, okay, we've got a great podcasting operation. We've got a great number of shows, and we've got a good cadence. We've got loyal, great sponsors and listeners. But Bloodstream Media, as we know it, it really does, it has just become clear. It wants to stay within this bleeding disorders, and then maybe with like a lean into chronic and a lean into rare health. It's not natural, the health entertainment, and that's not to say somebody couldn't do it. There's a world where that could be executed at a super high level. I'm certain of that. But where this has gone, that's not what this is, and this doesn't want to be that. That doesn't preclude us from considering in a real blue sky way what our future podcasting could be. So you're alluding to some of the shows that we greenlit, and yeah, we can't talk about any of them right now, but one in particular has a very strong health thread pulled through it. So it's absolutely born out of Bloodstream Media.
Two of them do. I think two of them do.
But well, that's true. That's true, actually. So there you go. But they are oriented for a Gen Pop audience, and that's a different product, And as much as I've tried to sort of blend a Gen Pop show with our Bleeding Disorders World show, there's a ceiling on how much that appeals to people outside our community. And again, fine, totally cool. Doesn't matter. Let's just do the show then that works here, and then over here with this capacity we have, we can build new stuff for other people. So that's what we're alluding to when we're kind of vaguely describing growth within our podcasting, is it's kind of begun to branch now into Bloodstream Media, which we've had and will continue to serve Bleeding Disorders. We have Making Movies as Hard as part of our network too. Most likely that will be phased into what that second entity is to become, as it will be a more natural fit there in the end. And come the fall, early winter, there will hopefully be a whole bunch of other fun podcasts that Believe Limited has to offer. To Amy's point, some of which have to do with health, not just that one. Some of which have to do with health, so you may be interested, and you'll certainly hear us talking about over on Bloodstream.
I think, I think the thing that's exciting is that it will appeal to, our core audience here on Bloodstream with Ask the Expert. It will appeal to you in some of your other interests, some of the things that are coming down the pipe, and the host ideas and the structure ideas are just so fun. And so stay tuned for all of that stuff. I mean, I think if you follow Bloodstream Media on your social channels, if you follow on Instagram, if you follow on Facebook and Twitter, you will be in the know of the things coming out, and we'll kind of guide you to where those will eventually land, wherever they will land, but that will be the place. You don't need to necessarily refresh your web browser all the time, but I think they are going to be very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll still be over on the Bloodstream podcast doing all the great stuff that we do for this community. It's funny talking about community. It's been such a strange time to feel connected to a community, and I say that, we brought up earlier with NHF being around the corner, and as we're talking about how do we not leave certain people behind as we make these transitions. I had somebody yesterday too asking me like, what do you think people in the community are thinking about this thing? And I was like, I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest. Like I can't tell you right now. I haven't seen anybody in a while. I'm talking to a lot of people virtually. In some ways it's interesting. I kind of, even though everyone's now online, in some ways I feel like we're kind of more isolated as a national community than when you had all of your local touch points and stuff, but then also an online community, and there was like a nice natural relationship to that and the way like information and news seem to move. But that all just doesn't seem to be happening in quite the same way now, and I'm sure that has to I'm sure there are many factors, but yeah, I do expect when we get back to some flow of seeing each other in person and having meetings and educational sessions, and that it'll start to feel a little more, I don't like to use the word normal kind of has lost all meaning to me, but yeah, something just kind of feels off about the community. This sounds so dumb.
No, I think, this community thrives on seeing each other. We have this routine that, even with this, NHF's Bleeding Disorder Conference being virtual, most of us have a ritual every year that we see each other twice a year. We see each other once at HFA and at BDC, or several local chapter events. You see people.
Right.
And those are all taken away. So I agree with you. It feels a bit fragmented. It feels distant. I was
talking to somebody at NAMI earlier today, and she was talking about the importance of what it means to see people in person, like what it is to be with someone in person. And I had a friend call me actually earlier about something, and he just mentioned that last night he dreamt of giving friends hugs. Like he was actively dreaming about hugging friends. He's missing hugging people. And yeah, there is a routine. You're right. There is something about the routine too of seeing people. I think when you're managing chronic illness, routine is generally a friend. and getting into rhythms with things. That's like generally something that, I don't know, I at least feel secure with routine. And that has been taken away in so many ways. But I guess from that community piece, like that to me has just felt odd for the first time in many years to just feel like I'm a little more removed. But I guess we're all a little more removed. There isn't a place, and maybe the BDC will change that. You know, I was able to participate only in a little bit of the virtual summit that WFH had earlier in June. And perhaps that would have assuaged some of these feelings a little bit. Maybe the BDC will coming up. To be honest, the thing that's been most grounding for me community-wise has been, so our Breaking Through program went completely virtual. I know I've talked about it on Bloodstream. I don't think I've heard you talk about it here on Ask the Expert. No, don't know why you would. But so Breaking Through and Hemophilia the Musical, this musical theater and art therapy workshop that we've been running for a few years, when all went haywire, the 2 live workshops that we had planned for 2 different weekends with 2 different casts spread across a couple different months, that all became one large virtual cast participating in what's become a Zoomsicle, Hemophilia the Zoomsicle, with rehearsals on Saturdays and Sundays for a few months and master classes. Like, it went from being a 3-day commitment where you would go to Chicago and learn about theater and art therapy to like, you're in a show that we're doing online, you're needed constantly, you have to self-submit a lot of material. And they love it. And they're so bought in. And every Saturday and Sunday at 9 Pacific, we spend time singing and stretching, and you know, it's about the community. It's about our community. So we're inevitably talking about these things in the context of the rehearsals. And it has really been like such a rock. And I didn't realize it until this past weekend when the cast started, when they realized we only had 2 rehearsal weekends remaining after the one we were on. They started to get that like end of run panic. If you remember from theater days when it's like the show's coming to an end and we're never going to see each other again, and how do we stay in touch? And I was like, that's really sweet. They've really bonded. That's awesome. That's part of what this is all about. It's a huge part of what it's all about. And then I was like, wait, I've bonded. I'm sad. Where am I going to go on the weekends? This is all I do. So yeah, it was an interesting, fun little moment, but it's been a great way to stay connected to community. Just, not how I thought I'd stay connected to community spring into summer 2020, but that's actually been my number 1 touch point.
You know, I love that you brought up Breaking Through because I don't feel like I talk about it enough. And I think like just where we are as a country, as a nation, we don't talk about...
what's going on? What's going on? Are things...
Everything's fine. We're fine.
Okay.
But we don't talk enough about what the arts can mean for somebody that might feel a little bit different, or anybody really. I mean, it is such a magical opportunity and experience, especially at that age, that high school age. I used to choreograph for high school musicals, and it was just always magical. You know, you have 90 kids on stage, which is, 80 kids too many.
Bonkers.
And, none of them have experience. They're just doing it, and they come from all walks of life, and there's just nothing like it. And, this program, it is a musical theater intensive program where they put on a show. The show is written based on their written submissions. So they have a hand in writing the story through their own story. Every kid has a bleeding disorder or is affected by a bleeding disorder in some way. It took forever to get funded. I mean, it's just not something that gets funded.
Yeah. No.
And it's just magical. I have a very... I'm not even involved in the program, with my workload. And I just, oh my goodness, I see these emails come in, like these kids write these emails to just, Patrick and their directors, of just what their experience has been. And I've just, so if you're a parent, if you're listening and you have a teenager, my goodness, steer them towards Breaking Through. The applications will be once a year, I believe. I have no idea what it's going to look like next year. But I mean, it's this application process, and it just, oh my goodness, it's important. It's so cool.
It's been cool too because we've had people who would never otherwise have participated in the musical. because we've made it as clear as we can that it's not America's Got Talent. It's not about a competition to see who's the best bleeding singer. Like, that's not what it is. So we've really encouraged people who have an interest in the arts, even not even like acting and singing, like musical theater is so specific. We're just like, if you're broadly interested, you're at home here. And we're people asked us to put our money where our mouth is. We got people with all kinds of range of experiences through the years of the program, and it's been so cool to watch it coalesce. I mean, you and I both come from a camp background, and I know there's that book, like Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, I think it's called, or something along those lines. And I feel like everything I ever needed to know I learned at theater school or at camp. Mm-hmm. It was really one of those two places. And when it comes to leadership, most of it was at camp. And what I know is that it's okay if you have a singer who is extremely confident and talented, and you have someone who is less confident and doesn't have the same skill but really wants to be there. Like, I know full well that you can make a great product happen with that. And I think it's just insecurity in the minds of drama teachers or directors at the high school level of all places who aren't able to see that. So, because we've also had some horror stories from these individuals about their experiences in shows and being told this, that, or the other by a teacher or a classmate or what have you. And it's like, oh, that's unnecessary. And then having to kind of like get some of that out of the way so that you can encourage that individual. No, I'm sorry, and that will probably happen again, but know that that's wrong, and that you're here and you're safe here, and we're all subscribing to playing intense make-believe and being a little vulnerable and looking stupid and silly and not knowing how to work the Zoom appropriately. Like, we're all in this together, and they really have taken that on, and it's so neat to see it at this point of the process, how gelled they are, and starting to, someone told me they started, I don't even know what this means, but they started a Discord group or chat or something. Discord's an app.
Yep, great. Don't know what that means.
So like they're going to keep talking to each other.
Rough. Like I feel like I thought you were going to say something like TikTok or Snapchat, and I'll be like, yeah, I know what that means, but I've never heard of Discord. So that it's happening. Yeah, it
just keeps happening. There's just always, you can't catch up anymore. We're past that age.
Brutal.
I know.
One more, just because this is cool, and I'm again going off script. Shocker. Tell everybody a little bit about what the science fair experience will be like at the virtual BDC. It's something that I think folks should check out as well. This is something at BDC that will be very different from anything else there, and since everybody is able to go through the virtual BDC experience, there'll be more access to the science fair, and it's really family friendly, and yeah, it's great. So yeah, family friendly indeed. It's a great, so if you go to thesciencefair.org, there's a video from our 2019 BDC year one execution of it in person. And you'll see it's designed kind of like if a high school science fair was on steroids. That was kind of our overarching conceit for it. So there are these blown up trifolds with all kinds of critical information at our various modules. And now for the online version, we've taken all that and expanded it. So each of our modules is now online. And the very first one introduces the clotting cascade and what actually happens when a blood vessel bursts. And we've got little characters of platelets and fibrin mesh and all the goodies, which we've also turned into magnets, which I'll get back to. And the rest of the experience kind of follows, where traditionally there'd be something you could interact with. So in person, there was a table designed like an open, half-open blood vessel, and there were tactile factor 8, factor 9, factor 10 that you could connect and bring over to a blood tear. Can't do that virtually. So instead, each module has a virtual host, Dr. Morales, who kind of walks you through what the module's about. You can click to read the cool info that's nicely designed and well laid out on the trifolds, or there's various videos and ways in which you can participate with what's going on the trifold and at that module. So that wasn't very clear. Here's an example. I mentioned the magnets before.
we are sending out to anyone who wants them, one per household, our Believe at Home boxes. And the Believe at Home boxes include stuff from both the Science Fair and Stop the Bleeding, our web series, which this year is all about virtual summer camp. So there are items for both of those. For Module 1, we have the clotting cascade in magnet form. So you can get these giant fridge-like magnets. I think today we were just talking about sizes. I think now it's like the base is 12 by 12. Like it's a sizable playing field there. Where you can actually, with your kid, or just because you think magnets are fun if you're like me, you can actually work on like what happens if a blood vessel bursts. Okay, this goes over this, and then these guys get together, they come down here, and then this happens, and then you can label it. So it really makes the process of understanding what factor 8, factor 9, factor 10, von Willebrand factor, platelets, what do all these things actually kind of look like and do in relation to each other? Well, you can experience that with the magnet set. That's the closest we could get to having you be there to touch it and feel it in person. And then the following modules, they look at what happens over time when bleeds occur, and we see a knee deteriorate over time. We've got 9 or 10 short videos on treatment options, as well as videos on certain populations within our community that we want to draw a little extra attention to. So there's a hemophilia B specific trifold and visual. There's women with bleeding disorder specific trifold and visual. Von Willebrand factor specific. So we've tried to make it as inclusive as possible. And it all culminates with, again, what would have been our in-person construction site for gene therapy. The future is under construction. Get it? That's where the scientist meets the hard hat. We don't have that, but we do have the video to go through and some pieces in your magnet set to, again, help give that tactile experience of like, oh, okay, so this thing goes into that thing, then that thing reaches the liver, and then that thing goes into the liver. And you kind of get the idea by playing with the magnets, these very high concept science ideas. So if you're interested in receiving one of the Believe at Home boxes that has the Science Fair magnet set and the Stop the Bleeding virtual summer camp goodies, you can go to believeltd.com/believe boxes, normal dash, not like the underscore kind. So it's believeltd.com/believe-boxes. Short little form. We don't share your information. It's totally free, and you can get one per house. There's different t-shirts. So there's a lab coat, a lot of goodies in there.
There's lots of good stuff there. Check it out on social too. I think if you go to our Instagram or Facebook feeds, you can find the link to sign up for boxes. Which all the stuff is in my house right now. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're you're just piling it all up.
I do. I have thousands and thousands of Stop the Bleeding branded marshmallows. Marshmallows, everyone. Marshmallows.
I'm just glad you said thousands and not hundreds, because I've been a little worried the longer they sit that they might not remain there.
I did want to try one out. Yeah, and Rob was like,
I mean,
Amy.
one is okay. Yeah, well, he would, because he'd be like, well, you try one, you're going to want 10, 10 becomes 100. Like, that's so.
Absolutely correct. I was like, are we going to buy graham crackers and chocolate? He was like, calm down.
Not until the episode comes out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk over on Bloodstream next month more about the BDC and the virtual BDC, how it's laid out, kind of how to navigate it.
Yeah.
It's a different year, so we're going to take that on a little bit as one of the ways that we can kind of help you prep. Like, what is it this year? Where do you go? When? What to expect? And then what exactly is it that we're doing while we're there? So that'll be third Monday of the month, the 20th of July, over on the Bloodstream podcast, Amy's new podcast.
My new home, y'all.
Your new home base. Is there anything else you want to touch on here, Amy?
I was just about to say, I was like, Patrick, thank you so much.
Put the parking brake on?
It's truly,
yeah, of course.
Truly comes full circle, as you were the first host of Ask the Expert, and now you're the final guest.
I guess it does. It comes full circle. And it might come back. I don't want to leave false hope, but I also don't think there's reason to write that off entirely. Depending on the ways in which the Bloodstream Media network continues to evolve, there might be very good reason, to pick it back up again. So, and there's no reason to unsubscribe to it. And in fact, if you haven't subscribed, I'd recommend subscribing so that if it does come back, it'll just populate in your feed. In the meantime, it just won't be there. So, I subscribe to all kinds of things that aren't active just so that when they come back, I know. But yeah, Amy, thank you for giving us this opportunity for a little bit of closure and to kind of have this nice, loosely structured discussion about all kinds of stuff. And thanks for all the great work you did on Ask the Expert. I think it was a show and a program that improved as it went, in no small part due to the commitment of the people who were running it. So thank you for taking it on with such care and sense of responsibility and making it your own, and doing so, bringing through a lot of great people, having a wide range of conversations over the past year and a half. And thank you. I'm excited to bring all of that now into the Bloodstream podcast and figure out how that just becomes better and more effective at serving this community.
Absolutely. And you guys will be able to hear me on the Bloodstream podcast every month. So head over there and subscribe. And thank you again, Patrick, for this opportunity. It was an honor. And it was an honor, listeners, being with you on this journey as we, ask the tough questions and feel inadequate. That's part of it. And it was great to be in that world with you. And I'm excited for the future. It'll be fun.
Yeah, it will be. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.